We're here at the 2018 PRI show in Indianapolis, and of course that's the racing show, and it's also the business of racing. And one of the most popular aspects of racing is road racing and autocross events that are becoming more popular for kind of regular non-professional people to go out and enjoy their cars. So we thought we'd talk to some of the people who are involved in this side of the sport, hobby, and business. And we put together a very esteemed panel. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, first of all. Sitting at the far end is our friend Tim Strange, who is a hot rod builder, but also the guy who does a lot of the announcing at all kinds of events. But today the relevancy is the Good Guys Autocross events. So thank you for joining us. Next to him is Mr. Jimmy Day from FM3 Marketing. You know Jimmy from the Optima Challenge events and other autocross and just driving events all over the country and maybe all over the world.
Hopefully.
Yeah, there you go. Next to him in the middle is Mr. David Shard, who is the one of the owners of Forgeline Motorsports. Forgeline, of course, makes high-performance racing wheels for cars in all racing levels, you know, basically all over the world. Next to him is Mr. Kyle Tucker, who came up as an enthusiast and then an engineer at GM, started Detroit Speed, and now is also the proprietor of Gear Effects. And speaking of GM engineers, here's Mark Stilo, who's what I call kind of the ultimate hobbyist, because he's been able to take a personal enthusiasm for high-performance cars into a career at GM, but then you still play with, you know, non-professionals at amateur events whenever you can. So, like I said, I'm about the only guy here that doesn't belong on this stage, so I appreciate you guys coming up. So, I think we'll start with Mr. Strange at the end. As you are announcing these events, you probably see and witness more of this entry-level autocross type racing than any of us. What are people into about this?
Well, like you said, I announce mostly at the Good Guys Autocross events. I announce other racing events, but the autocross I do Good Guys. And Good Guys is set up, in my opinion, that there's chalk marks and cones around everywhere. So you can get lost, but it's way easier to find your way around for the beginner, the rookie. I always encourage people that hasn't done autocross before to come to a Good Guys event and learn some of the handling of your car before you step into one of the bigger events where they're faster and you're basically, it's like downhill skiing where you got to know which way the cone's tilted down and there's a gate you got to go around. So the cool thing that I get to see, because everybody rolls up, is there's a lot of fathers and sons and daughters and families sharing cars or building extra cars, and there's little bets on who gets to pay for dinner, who's the dad's faster or whatever. And at the Good Guys, there's a lot of that. Yes, there's the pro class that everybody complains, but as we all know as automotive fans, politics and complaining about rules and regulations started even before there was automobiles. When they were racing horse and buggies, they were complaining about that. So I have to focus. I have contracts to say who I can and can't talk about, who are sponsors, so I don't have to deal with any of the rules and regulations, and I enjoy that part.
Nice, nice. Well, speaking of events, Jimmy, you have evolved through all kinds of these events, doing some pretty major stuff, and I think the specific example we'll use is the Optima Ultimate Streetcar Invitational, which kind of started as an outgrowth of the SEMA show where we had show cars, and the question was, do any of these things actually run? So you said, well, let's put them on the track, and now that's its own deal. You've got qualifiers. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that series has really evolved from a single event, and like you said, that event evolved from us walking around the SEMA showroom floor. When you get to SEMA, when you're setting up, you see all these cars that get pushed into the booths, and then we walk around when the show is open and we hear all the people bragging about all the stats on these cars and how good they are on a road course or drag strip and everything else. And it's like, we thought, you know what, let's create a platform that gives the manufacturers and service providers at SEMA an opportunity to show that their parts and services actually work. We started out the concept being just a single event. Let's see if we can get some cars off the SEMA showroom floor. Then we created the Invitational, which was 50 cars that we wanted to be some of the, and we called it Ultimate Street Cars. So we wanted to get 50 of what we thought could be the best cars on the planet that were real street cars and bring them out. And that grew and grew, and when it was just an Invitational with 50 cars, we would get upwards of 400 people saying, would you pick my car, would you pick my car? So that led us to believe we could evolve it into a qualifying series, which we did, and now we're going into our 5th season with a full qualifying series, national points-based championship, and then a championship at SEMA. So it's really taken off and done well for, as you say, the amateur kind of driver to come out and get some great seat time and have some fun.
What I think is interesting there is that these were never really full amateur cars, though. I mean, you started off with the SEMA show car concept and then evolved into more actual real race cars. You've got some serious stuff out there.
There is some real serious stuff out there, but we take a lot of pride in really making sure that the majority of the cars that compete in our series are considered real street cars. They drive on the street, they have all the components necessary to be considered a street car. They have interiors, they have windows that roll up and down, they have HVAC, radios, wipers, blinkers, lights, all of that kind of stuff. So we've written the rules to really include all of those things, to really make sure that we are working with a performance street car and not really a race car with a license plate.
Maybe it's just the level of competition that as a spectator I see it appears very professional, very, very, very competitive.
Well, and it is, and that's, my hats are off to the manufacturers and service providers that build the kind of parts now that these amateur drivers can put on their cars, because they are race quality parts that we're putting on these performance street cars, and they really do work. And we're seeing cars do things that 10 years ago no one would have even conceived of.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of somebody who makes the parts, David, you, if I'm not mistaken, you kind of grew up racing a Yenko Stinger, right? Corvair stuff?
Well, yeah, I started racing in a Corvair Yenko Stinger. My dad raced those cars, and so it's a great car to learn in, because once you figure out how to drive a Corvair on a racetrack, you can drive just about anything.
Make sure the front's always pointing forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you were able to take a passion of driving as an amateur racer and grow that into a business that, the people that are racing in Jimmy Series, a lot of them are on your wheels and far beyond, pro teams all over the world. Tell me a little bit about, I know it's a fairly long story, but making those jumps, did you ever see yourself, did you envision yourself as a professional racer at any point?
No. I think everybody wants to do that eventually. And I did some World Challenge racing and some IMSHA racing, but nothing on a very super high level. But yeah, I think that's where everybody wants to eventually get, and that's what kind of drives you to make the car better. And maybe somebody will. And back then, it was a lot more realistic then than it is today, really.
Budget-wise,
budget-wise,
yeah.
and that type of stuff for sure.
Yeah. So now, it's got to be an interesting feeling to be walking through the Forgeline facility and wondering, where these wheels are going to go that you're making, and it's got to be kind of neat to think that now you're providing, some of the means for these people to be competitive through your parts.
It's fantastic. We love it, and being able to supply wheels to cars like the Mustang GT4 and the Chevrolet Camaro GT4, factory-built race cars, come with Forgeline wheels. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's impressive. And Kyle, you were always a car enthusiast and ended up going to engineering school, working for GM. That was quite a while ago, but what was it that made you want to go from a corporate type job to starting a business in the performance suspension arena, basically?
Yeah, I grew up, my dad was a car guy. I grew up racing and always had a passion for wanting to drive and wanting to make a car work better so it was easier to drive, right? So I need all the help I can get. And it was always a lifelong passion to become, better educated on what changes to make on the car to make it easier to drive and faster to drive. So learned a lot at GM, tons of resources, Mark can contest to even more now, but it was really a hobby that turned in. I had a car on the side we were building and turned into a profession. It was just the right time at the right place. And some of the parts that I designed and had on that car, it just became the right time to put some of those parts out in the industry. So took a leave of absence from GM and just never looked back, and it's been quite a ride, but I wouldn't want it any other way. So it's been fun, and the industry, I think, kind of time-wise played into people wanted more functional parts more than just nothing against some of the past manufacturers at all. It's just it's evolved. The tires have evolved. Everything's evolved where people want the best of both worlds. They want a car that can handle and a car that can ride right and also be quiet. So it kind of just all came together at the right time.
The car that Kyle's talking about was the Twister Camaro, the yellow one, which what was it, 99 or 2000?
2000.
2000. I was working for Hot Rod Magazine at the time, producing their TV show, and we're on the Hot Rod Power Tour, and I see this yellow Camaro, and I'm looking under the hood, and I'm like, where'd you get that? Where'd you get this? We got to talk to this guy. So we did an interview with him, and on that trip were numerous magazine editors and photographers for a bunch of different magazine companies, and you caused a policy change, which I'm not sure you're aware of, but that Twister Camaro ended up on the cover of about 6 different car magazines at the same time. And boy, did people get in trouble for that. And the great thing is the car was totally worthy of it, and everybody loved it. And I remember being in the editorial meetings, and there was a pecking order. You have your bigger circulation magazines, and Hot Rod and Carcraft, and some of the Chevy performance stuff. And the big boss says, "How did this happen?" So now, if you're an enthusiast and you get approached by a magazine editor, the first question is, "Has this been featured before?" This guy.
I didn't know
Why?
that.
So congratulations. Well, and speaking of, how we're all spoiled by how well new cars perform, and they always start and feel good and drive nice, and then you get in your 60s car or even your race car and it's not that same experience, that's kind of where you fall in.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate through my career. Kyle and I have known each other for a long time, and we were both in Missouri, and I really wanted to work for one of the OEs, be the guy that designed new vehicles. So I've had the ability to be at GM, work on some really interesting stuff, push the technology envelope, but then I can go home at night and be my own chief engineer and build my own hot rods.
Now, sometimes there's this perception that if you work for a big company, especially like an automaker, that the engineers are kind of niched down and they have very specific tasks. And I know some guys who work there, and they tell me the stories of how much time they put in designing a door latch mechanism. And I thought, it's exciting to a certain degree, but at the same time, it's kind of limited. So Kyle was able to go from doing that to a whole product line. What is your daily routine over there now?
Well, I've kind of moved into a management position, those who can do, those who can't manage. So I've been able to kind of move up into a role where I'm doing overseeing all the product lines at General Motors for a lot of the advanced chassis controls features and things like that. So
Wow.
I've got a great team. Been able to get some young guys that are kind of like Kyle and I when we were younger. Like we were modifying 69 Camaros. These guys are all buying C5 Corvettes and modifying them and different vehicles like that. So you kind of see that same spark of people trying to do things, and you foster that. So you kind of have a mix of people that are senior, that understand stuff, with young guys, and you blend that out. So, I had a little bit of time in the aftermarket, and the aftermarket is an interesting place. You can move faster, but at the OE level, you can go really deep in a technical area and really become a technical expert. When I first came to GM, I was surprised. Like you mentioned, there's a guy that designs a latch. Well, that latch is going to go on 1 million pickup trucks. So the statistical probability that it has to be perfect because we're going to make 1 million a year of it. So the reason that people have to specialize in these really small niche areas is the usage is -40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. They're used all over the globe. So we got to test and validate for all those scenarios, which is a much more rigorous environment than a lot of other parts and components in this industry, the aftermarket.
So it's always fascinating too to see your involvement there and how you apply that to your victim of choice, which is the 69 Camaro.
Yeah. Well, the 69 Camaro to me is kind of like the old 911 Porsche. They keep on making that thing and refining it, so I've been kind of doing the same thing. So every time I do a new one, I learn something new. Back we started doing this out of my garage in Royal Oak, Michigan. Then Kyle's products got a lot better. Like now, everything we did when Kyle was building Twister and when I was building some of my first cars, we were fabricating those parts ourselves. And now Kyle's made it pretty easy to buy really good parts that are really well integrated, and you can build. A guy at home can duplicate what we were doing on our Bridgeports and fabbing up ourselves. So, I like the iterative process of just kind of always taking the same platform and refining it. So it's kind of like the guy with the Singer Porsche. Those guys have kind of perfected the 911. If you like air-cooled Porsches.
Sure. Well, you've taken them to levels that are unbelievable. And the fun thing is all of us who build those type of muscle cars, we've always got somebody that we're you do it first. Generally. It's
Well, not me. I mean, there's been a lot of people in front of me that did a
well,
lot.
sure, yeah, but I mean, when this guy rolls a car out, there's something going on. It's good to see.
Appreciate that.
But a great point is the quality of parts. And Tim, being primarily a hot rod and a custom builder, give me your thoughts on how, for the muscle car world and also in that world, the things you can buy now that people don't have to build, and how that fits into the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, like the same thing as these guys were talking about. I've been building hot rods for a living for 25 years. Back then, there was a couple suspension people that made only Mustang 2s. And when I did my first LS swap, there was only 2 people that made electrical harness to put that LS in 98, 99 when I did that. And nobody had it figured out how to charge the alternator. You still had to go buy a bunch of crap at Auto Radio Shack and call your local electrician that rebuilt transistor radios and try to figure something out. Now there's probably 1,000 LS engine swap guys. And the quality of stuff has greatly improved. And there's a lot of people. I'm also a SEMA new products judge. I've been doing that for 13 years. And I take great pride in that because there's a lot of crap on the market. There really is. There's a lot of people that push their stuff out to make SEMA, and it ain't ready to go to SEMA yet. And my hat's off to like Kyle. I have a huge respect for what this guy does, and he never puts anything out that isn't ready for the market. And a lot of people realize that. That's why he sells so many parts. But you can. Back in the days when the street rods were big, everybody complained because everything was a catalog car. You order your TCI suspension, you order your GM crate motor, you put your fiberglass body on it. But in a good way, you can do that for the hobbyist that can't afford to have somebody like me build your car. You can order your chassis, your bolt-in front end, or your welded on a little bit, and order your crate motor, and the hobbyist can still build a really awesome car because the parts are amazing.
So, David, that touches on a great point of parts quality. The difference between something that can handle track competition or even spirited driving events versus something that just looks nice. In your world, that can be a big problem.
That can be a huge problem, and we got into the pro touring industry 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, because they were having a problem at some of these muscle car events of people breaking wheels. And so we had a couple people come to us and said, would you be interested in putting some wheels on some of these cars? And I didn't even realize some of those cars kind of existed, that whole market was even there. And I was like, wow, these cars are super cool.
Yeah.
So we dove right into the pro touring market. Made the cars are making unbelievable power. They handle unbelievable, and they're really heavy. It's not a Porsche. It's not a, so you have to take all of those factors in consideration and make a wheel that's sturdy enough and strong enough and stiff enough to handle all those.
Yeah, especially the weight. Part of the fun of the pro touring side of things, and the loose definition of that is generally a muscle car bodied thing that still has that look, but performs like something far more modern in all facets, straight line braking, turning, and those are hard on parts, especially tire technology has come so far.
That's a major thing that people don't understand. The amount of grip that a current tire does, even 5 years ago, it's changed dramatically.
So, Kyle, you guys make suspension parts for these cars that have to stand up to all that stuff. I'm envisioning that you see people do things that maybe they shouldn't be doing, and there's got to be some giant amount of product liability that goes along with that. But you apply your engineering background, like Mark was talking about, testing and iterations before a part comes out, but that's not necessarily the fastest, cheapest, or easiest way to market.
No, it's not. I mean, and I learned a lot, like I said, working at GM and to see the in-depth testing and redundant testing and things you go through to bring a part to market. And, it's like Dave was saying, the cars are fast these days. On the tires that we have today, they're street tires, they're 200 treadwear tires most of the time. But Jimmy reminds us sometimes at the tracks we're running at that they're very, very respectable times that some of the top sanctioning race bodies are running at, and they look at our times and think, wow, those guys are doing that on street cars and street tires. So it's come a long way in the last few years, and to bring a part to market that it has to withstand what you can do on the street, impacting curbs or potholes or anything, but also withstand the repeated loads on a track. There's a lot that goes into it, and I wouldn't sleep at night if I didn't know how many hours that we put into our engineering, our prototypes, the testing. I mean, everything we do to bring a part to market. Yes, it does. It takes longer. We typically make a part, manufacture a part for the aftermarket industry that maybe a lot of guys probably scratch your head and think, why would you spend that kind of money to do it? But to me, I understand that it's got a long list of things it has to hold up to, forever. These cars will outlive most of us for sure, and that's a big deal to bring a part to market that's a high-stressed item, and you've got people's lives or families riding around in these cars. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, without a doubt. So the great thing is that we have an industry that is strong enough and innovative enough to have these parts available. So now we start to put all this stuff together. It doesn't necessarily have to be an American car or a muscle car or whatever. There's enough things where people can either buy a used race car or modify their own and get out there, right? So Jimmy, what's somebody's first steps if they're looking at shifting from being a spectator to a participant?
We try and make that barrier to entry as small as possible, and the way the events are formatted and built, we have some what I call low impact events like autocross and speed stop, where it can be as fast or as slow as you like. There's not a lot of danger in those of hitting anything solid. Get an opportunity to learn your car and drive it and get some real seat time without having to focus on, am I going to hit something? Is somebody going to hit me? When we do road course stuff, and road course stuff can be a little intimidating to new people, but we do have a novice class which is purely designed for the new person to come out and get on the road course. We don't allow any passing in the novice class except on the front straight. We do it with a point by. We have a very specific drivers meeting to help the drivers understand how that works, to try and take some of the pressure off of them and help them relax. We run our events by driver experience level. So when we have novices on course, we don't have any of our intermediate guys or our expert drivers out there. That way it allows a driver to be able to relax out there on the road course and really enjoy what they're doing, learn what they're doing, and really minimize passing and all those things that you have to think about that kind of complicate things. We do 2-day weekends, and I think our entry price is really low for what we do. We're really lucky to have a great number of sponsors for our series, and in fact everybody on this panel has participated in our series in one way or another, either as sponsors, brand ambassadors, judges on our design and engineering panel. Everybody on this panel has been part of that in some way, shape, or form. We're really proud of that, but for rookies that come out, we have a 78% return rate for people that come out and do one of our events one time. 78% of them come back and do another one. So we feel like we must be doing something right. And for us, it's all about the fun. And that's a big part of bringing somebody out and making them comfortable, is make sure they're having fun. Make sure they're having fun while they're there. Kind of help take that pressure off of them.
Yeah, well, if it's no fun, nobody wants to do it.
Correct.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Tremendously high loyalty rate, 78%. Yeah. So Tim, as you call the events at the Good Guys,
Which, touching on Jimmy's point, I have done the design and engineering, and if you do that, you will make enemies. Because I think there was actually letters written about me because I was honest, and but that's what
They actually
makes
spelled your name right.
Yeah, of course they did. Yeah, and
Well,
but that's
this
what
is-
makes
thi-
their race series different, because they do the design and engineering that we don't do at Good Guys.
that aspect is kind of the car show aspect, right? Where you analyze the cars based on design and engineering. And you've had a number of really top level judges for that too, but that's about the only part of that that's subjective, and that's why you got in trouble.
Yeah.
It's not a lap time. Right. Tim has opinions sometimes. Yeah, right.
I'm direct and honest. I say the things people are usually scared to hear.
Right. Well, along those lines, at the Good Guys Autocross, do we see people that are showing up that clearly aren't ready for this, and how does that go?
Yeah, we get on a lot of the smaller events. You get a lot of the people. You go to a different town that maybe, like, we went to Charlotte for quite a few years, not going there next year, but that's a racing hub. So all these guys, very few beginners do we have there that have never done it. But you go to Lexington, Kentucky, and we have a lot of rookies that came out the first time. Of course, we break it up. Friday and Saturday is up to 1987, and then Sunday late models. One different thing from the Good Guys event is we don't get a big turnout of late models. When you go to a USCA event, and to me it was like, oh, it's Corvette weekend, because those cars work good from the factory, so it's easy to upgrade them and make them a rocket ship, I think. But we always get the guys that'll come in, and then the new guys that come in with their Hellcat that they think they're awesome, and they don't know they push like a dump truck in the corners. And the guys with the Hellcats, they come in and they're like, hey, bro, how fast did that Camaro go yesterday? And it's like, dude, you ain't going to be 2 seconds close to the fastest Camaro that was yesterday. And I've never seen a Sunday All-American new car at a Good Guys event go faster than anybody did on Friday and Saturday. But again, Good Guys is more for the beginner that you see. We do, like I said, we have a pro class, so there's crazy tube chassis cars and big money and $300,000-$400,000 purpose-built race cars that come out there. But majority at the Good Guys event are, make an example of this guy, Richard Giese, goes to 70% of the events that I announce for Good Guys. He works a job that he flies all over the country. Every event that he comes to with the second gen Camaro, he drives it to and from the event. He's broke it before and had to repair it, stay over Sunday night and fix it at a buddy's shop. But that's a majority of what the Good Guys is, because they're street cars. We don't make them be street cars like you guys do the design engineering to make sure they have the points. But some of the idiots kind of weed themselves out, I like to say. But a lot of beginners do come out to the Good Guys events.
You ever see guys in rental cars?
We have had some of the good guys on, or the guys that race a lot on Friday and Saturdays, actually have won events with like a CTSV Caddy or something like that. So we do get rental cars. I always say we let anything American bodied or American powered take your grandma to church and bring her minivan on Sunday, and we have had that happen before. So that's what it's a big variety there, and I really enjoy I get tired of seeing the same. There for a while, it was like, oh, you didn't even have to look up off your computer, and it was like, I bet it's a Camaro with an LS. Because there's a lot of parts that make the Camaros work and the LSs work, but you get guys that come out with a little MG or whatever like that, or we get something on a Sunday that's got an LS swap in it. We'll get Lexus, and we get a huge variety. I've seen ramp trucks, rollback trucks come around the autocross. We've had a semi come around and totally flatten our timing system. So it's a huge variety. It's like a racing circus sometimes.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you touched on a neat point. So, Mark, in the new car world, there's a lot of things you can buy that are very capable, and I think there's a lot of things that you can buy that aren't necessarily positioned as a high performance, corner carving car, but you could probably take and go beat up on a weekend, and that's kind of your department. So new cars and GM cars in particular, they've got a feel, where they're kind of recognizable. And I know guys like Kyle and other suspension companies are trying to, make the older cars feel like that. Is there a formula? I mean, what is it that you're looking for that, I guess, connecting an average consumer that you're thinking is driving something to work and back every day, but what kind of performance level are they looking for that has maybe come from the experience of what we see on racetracks?
Well, GM, we're a full line manufacturer, so we make everything from minivans, or not minivans anymore, but sport utilities to Corvettes. But all those vehicles, we have vehicle technical specifications. The program team decides what they want that vehicle to do. So we know that consumer reports are going to handle them for double lane change and stuff like that. So we have to build a certain amount of handling performance capability in all of our product lines, but then we have different levels of track capability. So we'll define early on in a program if this thing just needs to meet consumer reports double lane change up to a fully hardened Corvette ZR1, that we make sure that it's capable and durable. And capability is lap time, durability is we actually run a complete 24-hour rigorous full tilt run on the car to make sure that when the customer gets it, it's going to stay together. So there's a whole, but in there's all these different shades of we kind of know from history how much a person's going to autocross a car over its life, so we autocross vehicles, but we have different levels of that depending on what the vehicle is.
Interesting. So I guess in that convoluted question, the answer is that the OEs pay attention to people that are going to use their car in motorsports.
Definitely, and also the new Camaros, Cadillacs, and Corvettes have a performance traction management system, so we can, with the power of the car now, really high. I mean, the power, you can go out, anybody can go out and buy a 750 horsepower Corvette these days. And that's 650 horsepower is easy peasy. So in the performance traction management, they can set level 1 to 5 on how aggressive that is. So the new guy that's learning, the first time he goes to an autocross or whatever, he may want to put it in level 1, so it's not going to be as bad, then he can slowly ramp that up. We have wet mode and some other modes like that. So we try to make the vehicle approachable, but then also there's the man mode. You push the button, it's all you. You turn everything off, and it's good to go. So we don't have, a lot of the manufacturers have a sleep mode where it'll pop on. When we turn it off, it's off. So,
Cool.
But so to get to your questions, we try to tailor it so that it's approachable for the guy. They can set it where they want, and it's kind of tailorable by the consumer.
That's neat that you can turn that all off.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm used to looking bad, so I want to make sure I can look bad in anything.
Make a lot of noise doing it.
That's right. That's right.
And it's all your fault.
Totally.
That happens.
I'm good for it. So we've been talking about American cars a lot here, but David, what are your thoughts on what, if you were to, tell somebody who's interested in racing, doesn't matter what the platform, what would be an efficient way to get involved with something that is maybe kind of affordable and kind of challenging, given a clean slate? What would you tell somebody?
Well, if you're talking about, autocross is obviously the easiest way to get in, and Good Guys isn't the only avenue for that.
Right.
The SCCA has a strong autocross all across the country in just about every city. SCCA does it, and there are other autocross. There's Drive AutoX, which is on a bigger level, but still, you drive anything. It doesn't have to be a muscle car. It can be anything. Right. That's a great avenue. NASA and SCCA. NASA is a amateur racing series, and they have an HPDE program. And you start out, if you've never done anything before, you start in an HPDE 1, and you get an instructor in the car, and they teach you how to drive the line. And HPDE 2, you do some basic passing skills, and then it goes all the way up. And then 4, if you're in HPDE 4 and you pass all the tests, you get your NASA racing license and you go racing.
Nice.
And that's a lower level amateur type of racing. A lot less expensive, but just as much fun as anything else.
And HPDE stands for High Performance Driving Event.
Yeah, right. Education event. Yeah.
Education event. Kyle, so you spend a lot of time. It blows my mind because your company is involved sponsoring so many events that you actually participate in at the same time. So it's kind of double duty. So it seemed like every weekend, the big black DSC rig is somewhere else, and it's like people, because of your FaceTime on television and the events, people are coming up to see Kyle, and it's like, well, he's over there, spinning around, and that's extending some of your passion of the off-road racing. What do you think is next for bolt-on parts to help people go racing?
GM and the big car companies are leaving less and less on the table, for the aftermarket. The cars, like Mark said, you can buy a car that is really fast, comfortable, and tunable too. But I still think we all in the aftermarket learn from the OEs. It's the parts that still come out on the new Camaros or the new Corvettes, they still trickle down into the aftermarket now sooner than later. With electric power steering, to me, that's something that is more of a norm than it used to be. Electronically controlled differentials, that's something else. So all those things that come from the OEs that we learn, and the reason that they go to them, it's durable, it's safe, and it's faster. So all that we look at in the aftermarket, and sooner or later it gets here to us. But those are two examples that I think are right on us, and we have to be on top of as a company.
Yeah, that's interesting. The electric power steering thing's pretty intriguing, and especially I love the fact that a lot of times people suggest that good old-fashioned hot rodding, is going away, but then you see people ripping the steering racks out of, Asian import, little four-door tin can sedans and adapting that to, whatever race car. That sense is still there. You just got to know a little bit more to make it work.
Right.
A great point again is safety. So Jimmy Day, what does your organization do to ensure or try to ensure safety of the drivers and participants? Because a lot of these people, if it's a newbie, it's their first time, they don't even know what they need.
Sure. Well, we list very clearly in our rule set what a person would need to show up at an event. So we try and, first of all, it's communication, right? Just communicate with them and let them know where to find it. This is what you need, and we're very specific in our rule set as to what each class of driver needs as far as safety equipment goes. We do a really detailed safety meeting at every event we do, both days. That starts off our day, and those safety meetings, there's no joking around there. That's when we try and help people understand that regardless of the level at which we're doing this, there's risk involved. So again, part of that communication is kind of grabbing people by the ears, looking them in the eye and say, this is risky. You understand what you're doing, so pay attention. It's a lot of fun. We want you to have fun. The other thing we do is, I always tell people we're the most professional amateur racing series in the world. The people that we have working for our series are some of the best in the industry, and they have more experience than a lot of professional race series out there. This is what we do. This is our job. This is our vocation, and for us, we feel like it's our job to take care and sometimes think for our racers, because we're firmly convinced that everyone buys their helmet at least one size too small because they're required to take their brains out before they put their helmet on. So we know that, and so we try and think for the drivers. The other thing is everyone that works for Ultimate Streetcar Association and FM3, and including everybody up here, we're all experienced drivers as well. We do these events, we participate in the events, and we do it at a pretty high level. So we understand from a driver's perspective how to communicate with other drivers. So, and then of course it's just your basic safety stuff on track. You know, we put similar driving level experience on track at the same time. We put similar cars on track at the same time. We line people up by lap time to minimize passing. We have some very specific passing rules and locations on the track. We've got radios on every corner, so we're monitoring very, very closely what's going on.
Right on. Yeah. Well, you're right. It's dangerous. It's risky. So you have to be thorough.
And I think we've done okay. Last I checked, we'd run over 148,000 competitive laps without an incident.
Wow. That is unbelievable.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. No. Sure. Great. Good for you. Well, this is cool. We've touched on all kinds of different stuff, and really I wanted this to be a session to maybe get people to think a little bit about, if they want to try it or if they want to go to another level or think about their car a little bit. As we wrap this up, let's do a fun little exercise, and we'll start with Tim and go this way. Tim, tell me, with all the parameters of waking up and having a good breakfast to the end of the day, what would your ideal track day be? What experience do you think would be ideal?
Well, when I race a two-wheeled pedal bike because I don't know what the name is for driving a car, but I know on motorcycles it's called whiskey throttle. So I'm sure there's something like that would happen. I actually have a vision problem. I see two out of one eye, so that's why I talk about racing instead of race. Kyle's scared because I've drove at a tire event with him being a driver's coach with me. Now he's like, oh, I was with you? But, I would love to be a driver, but in the happy world, I get a paycheck for announcing and making fun of most of these guys, and I'm not good enough driver to get a paycheck. So yes, I would love to be out there. My wife thinks she needs a race car, but this guy here keeps my wife pretty busy, so she doesn't have her own race car yet. So yeah.
Cool. Jimmy, how about you?
So the question again was, what makes an ultimate track day experience? Is that
What would your ideal day at the races be? Day at the track in any capacity?
For me, the ideal day at the track is an endurance race. I love endurance racing on a road course. I love to get in a car and go lap after lap after lap. And it's fun going out there and doing time trial sessions and getting 4 or 5 laps. That's fun because you're just on it. You're going hard. But endurance racing for me is a whole different ballgame because you have to think completely different. You have to manage the car, manage the parts on the car, manage your team when you're out on the course. And so for me, being able to run 25, 35, 40 consecutive laps and get better each one, for me is an ideal day. I love doing it.
That'd be cool. David?
These days it would be racing with the family. Derek, my son Derek just got his racing license through the NASA program. So I build a car, my brother's building a car, my dad's racing. And so a couple times last year, we're going to do it again this year. We've all gone out to the track, all raced in the same class, all enjoy that. That's a great
That's
track
cool.
experience. Yeah.
That must make for an interesting dinner experience on Sunday.
It can be, depending on what happens. Yes. We had a tragic incident. My shop manager also races in the same class, and we came together, and his car didn't fare too well after that. So.
Yeah, nice.
Not a good day of work on Monday.
All right. Kyle, how about you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been fortunate enough to race a lot of different things over the years. I grew up racing dirt, so I love that. I love the wheel-to-wheel part of it. But I mean, you know, coming into this, I think Jimmy's group, FM3 and Optima, has put on an awesome way to get out and run some really big, famous racetracks. To me, the faster, the better. I mean, I like that. Road America to Michigan, they've let us loose, and Daytona and things like that. But I think the only thing that could make it better is maybe if we could do it 24 hours, Jimmy. I don't know if you guys are all up for that, but we just keep doing it. But it's a great venue to start with. Maybe we can add in some dirt ovals sometime and things like that. But it's a great experience already.
I'm sorry to make you sit this long. I know you just got back from Baja, so it's probably a little. You're still recovering.
A little antsy still.
Yeah, cool. How about you, Mark?
The best day at the track in my whole life was at Jimmy Day's event in 2010, where everything came together, and I was lucky enough to do well and win that day. So it was a lot of work to get there, and that was like the best day I ever had at the track.
Wow, cool.
And my mom and dad were there to see it, which
Yeah.
made it even.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was a big day. I was there for that.
Yeah.
That was cool. All right, gentlemen. Well, listen. Thank you all for your insights and stories. This was very cool. Kind of driving home that point that the great thing about many forms of racing is that it doesn't always have to be up here, and you don't always have to be a spectator. You can participate on many different levels, and hopefully these gentlemen have given you an idea or two and maybe a little inspiration to get out there and work on that car and maybe find out how you can be the next track hero. I'm Kevin Ostie from the 2018 PRI show in Indianapolis.